The world he knew had been utterly destroyed. Amidst thunderous chaos, monstrous beings emerged from a fiery abyss, heralding an era of despair. To survive this cataclysm, humanity was forced into a desperate battle against these grotesque creatures, a struggle that consumed the protagonist's entire existence. He fought tirelessly, weariness etched on his face, but his spirit unbroken. Days bled into weeks as he relentlessly cleaved through demonic entities. A month passed in a blur of combat, facing ever more formidable foes. A year went by, and he had become a seasoned warrior, his resolve steeled by endless conflict. Even a decade felt like a fleeting moment in this perpetual war, leaving him standing solitary amidst the remnants of countless battles. Armed with a single sword, he had grown capable of felling any monster, fear a distant memory. Eventually, he confronted an immensely powerful, shadowy figure, the air crackling with dark energy around it. This entity, a veritable demon lord, declared that the protagonist's world was gone and urged him to give up. The young warrior recognized this being as the mastermind behind all the suffering. The demon lord, lamenting such wasted talent, extended an offer for the warrior to become its sword, its most powerful servant. The warrior, however, scoffed at the proposition, finding the idea utterly laughable. With a defiant roar, he launched himself at the towering demon, his blade arcing through the air. His strike landed, and the demon lord showed a flicker of surprise, its glowing red eyes narrowing. The warrior pressed his attack, his own eyes glowing with fierce determination. Their powers clashed in a maelstrom of destructive energy. The demon lord, unimpressed, retorted that no matter how much the warrior struggled, he was nothing more than an insect, easily crushed. A pained cry escaped the warrior as he was overwhelmed by the demon's might. He was flung back, but quickly regained his footing, launching himself into the air for another assault. The demon lord watched his approach with contemptuous ease, gathering its dark power. It unleashed a devastating attack, a wave of force that slammed into the warrior, bringing him to his knees, battered but not broken. As the demon lord stood, a shimmering blue pendant on its back became visible, pulsing with an unnatural light. A spark of understanding, or perhaps a desperate plan, lit the warrior's eyes. He surged forward again, this time aiming for the artifact. His sword whistled through the air, heading directly for the pendant. The blade connected, a sharp impact against the glowing gem. With a grunt of exertion, the warrior shattered the artifact. The demon lord, its form momentarily flickering to reveal a more bestial, bird-like visage, shrieked in outrage, calling him a bastard for destroying its favorite, and probably only, piece of bling. The warrior rose unsteadily to his feet as the fragments of the pendant exploded in a cascade of brilliant, unstable light. The demon lord bellowed in denial, trying to stop the inevitable. A blinding radiance consumed everything, with the warrior's silhouette at its heart. The explosion left him battered, adrift in a swirling, fiery nothingness. His eye, still glowing, reflected the dying embers of a world. He thought it was a magnificent, albeit destructive, view. Then, a shimmering distortion, like light through water, enveloped him. Suddenly, feet clad in simple sandals stepped on a solid ground. A young man with tousled black hair, dressed in a plain white t-shirt, walked down an ordinary street. A red warning light pulsed on a nearby building. A sign declared, Namsen Gate, B rank, C recommended, minimum 3 people, strictly prohibiting civilian passage and requesting hero registration. The young man, seemingly unconcerned, strolled past the warnings. He reached a gated building in Seoul's Yongsan district. With an effortless leap, he cleared the gate, landing softly on the other side. The alarm immediately blared, announcing an unregistered hero's forceful entry. A look of resolve settled on his face. He found himself in a tranquil, sunlit forest, his sandals pressing into the soft earth. A voice called out to the young man. A group of 4 individuals in tactical gear approached, one asking if he was lost. Their leader stated they were leaving and suggested he follow them. The young man stared back, his expression unreadable. A red-haired woman in the group whispered to her companion about his civilian attire, and the man agreed he didn't look like a hero. Another member commented that while porters wore varied gear, his outfit was peculiar, especially his ordinary backpack. They mused he might be a clueless porter abandoned by his team, though his casual sandals made even that seem far-fetched. The young man, scratching his head, simply stated he had just arrived. One of the younger group members excitedly declared he knew the kid was ditched. The leader sighed, remarking he'd seen many like him, full of misguided bravado from watching Gates on TV, and advised him not to speak so casually about such dangerous places. He lectured that trying to hunt in a gate without proper training or a license was suicide, especially a C-rank gate like Namsan. An F-rank would be a more suitable start. The young man, with an impassive face, replied that while he understood they meant well, he wasn't particularly thankful for their unsolicited advice. The group was momentarily struck dumb by his audacity. One of them, incensed, questioned what kind of crazy bastard he was, while another implored his young not to restrain him, clearly wanting to teach the newcomer a lesson. The leader, however, simply told them to calm down. He decided to let it be, reasoning that if the young man was determined to ignore sincere advice, he would learn the hard way. He muttered that gates were far from the sanitized version seen online. As if to punctuate his words, a colossal, green-skinned, tusked monster materialized behind the oblivious young man, the leader grimly noting it was a merciless world. The beast let out a deafening roar. The young man turned, nonchalantly reached into his backpack. The monster charged with earth-shattering force. A glint appeared in the young man's eyes as he whispered, 10 years. The monster registered. A brief moment of shock. With focused intensity, the young man unleashed a devastating punch, effortlessly bisecting the massive creature. The two halves of the monster thudded to the ground, a spray of dark blood painting the grass. Looking down at the carnage, he observed with a detached air that nothing at all had changed. The protagonist calmly surveyed the devastation he had wrought with a single punch. His hand, now lightly stained, relaxed at his side as he casually picked up a crudely fashioned, yet sharp, blade dropped by the vanquished monster. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. It seemed even in this new yet old world, the quality of monster drops remained consistently underwhelming. The blade was soon discarded, clattering onto the blood-soaked earth beside the fallen beast, its dark lifeblood seeping into the ground. He then reached into the monster's remains without a hint of disgust, extracting a faintly glowing crimson crystal. It was identified as a low-grade magic stone, a trinket he wouldn't have bothered to collect in his previous, more powerful existence. After wiping his hand on his backpack, he crouched, his senses already extending, scanning the deceptively peaceful forest around him. A subtle shift in his gaze indicated he sensed more threats as the thudding of heavy, clawed feet approached. A pack of similar tusked creatures, their eyes burning with primal hunger, burst from the tree-line. He moved to meet them, not with brute force, but with an almost lazy grace, his form a blur as he weaved through their initial, clumsy charge. With a precise flick of his wrist, he sent the previously collected magic stone whizzing through the air. It struck one of the charging monsters squarely, felling it instantly, as others reacted with surprised grunts. More monsters collapsed under his blows. He moved amongst them like a phantom, a whirlwind of controlled destruction, each movement economical and final, his expression remaining utterly unfazed throughout the brief, one-sided skirmish. Meanwhile, the group of heroes he had encountered earlier continued their patrol through the sun-dappled woods. The red-haired woman voiced a lingering thought about the rude guy they'd left behind, a hint of concern in her tone. One of her male companions scoffed, questioning if she was actually worried about an unregistered intruder. Their leader interjected calmly, stating that if the young man was indeed an unauthorized entrant, agents from the control center would undoubtedly be en route. As if on cue, several figures in sharp black suits were already moving swiftly through the gate's perimeter. The leader elaborated that Namsen Gate, being rank C, would necessitate the dispatch of elite agents, likely rank B or higher. He reassured his team that as long as the young man didn't lose his mind and rush into monsters, he wouldn't die, so there was no need for concern. Another young hero chimed in, agreeing enthusiastically that their Hyung Nim was right and that the arrogant punk was probably cowering somewhere, desperately awaiting rescue. Little did they know, the arrogant punk was at that very moment casually dispatching another orc, this one looking particularly bewildered as it was met with an open palm that effortlessly blocked its attack, followed by a punch that sent it flying. The monster's crude weapon shattered, its eyes wide with a brief, dawning horror before a lightning-fast kick separated its head from its shoulders in a graceful, yet brutal arc. The decapitated body slumped to the ground. He idly picked up another monster drop sword, inspecting it briefly before likely deeming it vendor trash, as a mental note tallied 3 more magic stones added to his collection. The bright blue sky, dotted with fluffy white clouds, seemed oblivious to the carnage below. His backpack felt negligibly heavier as he mentally reviewed his meager haul, a dozen low-grade stones and 16 lower mid-grade ones. The harvest, he mused, wasn't exactly stellar. Suddenly, a sharp voice cut through the air, calling, "This way." He turned, a questioning eyebrow raised, to see a man in a suit beckoning him forward. In moments, he was surrounded by several more men in black suits, their expressions uniformly stern behind their dark sunglasses. Their apparent leader announced they were from the Gate Control Center and curtly requested his hero registration ID, informing him that if unregistered, he would be escorted to the control center. The young man repeated the words Gate Control Center. The lead agent, his face a mask of officialdom, reiterated the need for compliance, a faint line of irritation appearing on his forehead as he wondered what fresh nonsense this was. The protagonist's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. This was quickly escalating from a minor distraction to a genuine annoyance. The lead agent, misinterpreting his silence, barked an order to get the cuffs, and a blonde-haired agent stepped forward, formally requesting his cooperation. He added a thinly veiled threat that refusal might necessitate the use of physical force. As the agent reached out to grip his arm, he continued his spiel, stating that any injury resulting from resistance would be solely the young man's responsibility and that it would be best to resolve matters calmly at the control center. With a movement too quick for the eye to follow, the protagonist effortlessly evaded the agent's grasp, leaving the blonde agent flailing for a moment, his eyes wide with disbelief. The young man, his voice devoid of emotion, simply told them not to bother him and to leave. The lead agent, his face flushing with anger at this blatant defiance. He and another agent activated electrified batons, the weapons crackling menacingly as they moved to flank the young man. The protagonist idly noted the rank 4 magic seals on the batons, thinking to himself that while they might give an orc a nasty shock, they were laughably inadequate against him. Before the agents could coordinate their attack, he moved, disarming the blonde agent and twisting his arm in a hold that elicited a yelp of pain. His voice, now carrying a chilling edge, delivered a final warning. If they didn't want to get hurt, they should turn around and go back. With a barely perceptible shift in his stance, the protagonist moved. He effortlessly parried the electrified batons of the 2 attacking agents. A swift elbow strike connected with one agent's jaw, followed by a powerful grip on his arm. The agent was then unceremoniously tossed aside with a resounding thud, his body contorting awkwardly in midair before he crashed to the ground. The second agent, caught off guard by the sudden incapacitation of his colleague, found his own attack easily deflected, his baton clattering uselessly as the protagonist disarmed him. The lead agent, witnessing the swift takedown of his subordinates, let out a grunt of pained surprise, beads of sweat forming on his brow. The protagonist turned his attention to the lead agent. In a blink, he vanished from his spot, leaving the agent staring in disbelief, wondering if his target had simply disappeared into thin air. Before the agent could process this, the protagonist reappeared in front of him, delivering a sharp, decisive blow to his chest. The lead agent crumpled, gasping for air as he staggered away. The protagonist addressed the wounded agent, asking if registered heroes typically faced such interference. The agent, struggling to regain his composure, confirmed that as long as heroes weren't committing illegal acts within a gate, there was no reason for agents to be dispatched. The protagonist then inquired about rift zones, which the agent, now visibly unnerved, explained were unknown spaces yet to be classified as official gates, often volatile and dangerous. The protagonist pressed further, wanting to know if this meant that no matter which gate he entered, these agents would inevitably pursue him, citing trespassing or similar infractions. The agent, thoroughly intimidated, stammered an affirmative, explaining that unauthorized entry by an unregistered hero automatically triggered a notification to the control center, leading to the dispatch of nearby standby agents. He then blurted out that rift zones weren't as easily accessible as gates, and that the Hero Association wouldn't stand idly by. The protagonist simply retorted, "Ah, so what?" his tone dismissive. The agent, now convinced he was dealing with a psycho, cursed his luck and berated himself for not reporting to headquarters immediately. A sudden, sharp pain lanced through him as the protagonist sent him sprawling with a casual backhand. "Such a nobody," the protagonist muttered, glancing over his shoulder at the downed agent. The agent, seething with impotent rage, vowed that next time he would definitely kill him. The protagonist, unconcerned by the empty threat, simply turned and walked away, deeper into the forest. A bright, ethereal light enveloped him, reminiscent of the shattering pendant. He heard a voice, almost a scream, exclaiming, "Ah, no." Then, everything went black as he lost consciousness, feeling as if he were being sucked into something vast and unknown. He considered it death, a final end to his struggles. His eyes fluttered open to find himself falling, or rather, floating upside down against a backdrop of a serene, cloud-filled sky. A figure stood before him, asking who he was. This ethereal being, with tousled black hair and ordinary clothes, introduced himself as CEO Dojin, stating simply that he was dying. He then made a request. If the warrior granted it, CEO Dojin would disappear quietly. The warrior, still disoriented, looked at this strange apparition, a flicker of confusion in CEO Dojin's eyes. The warrior, no longer having any lingering attachments to his own life after a decade of brutal warfare that saw him betrayed by a comrade and his country, friends, and family destroyed, reflected on the futility of his existence. No matter how hard he had lived, it had all amounted to nothing. He then directed a question to CEO Dojin. "You too, right?" Sensing a kindred spirit in this dying soul. CEO Dojin, however, expressed a desire for his remaining grandmother and sister not to suffer a similar fate, even if his own life was like that. The warrior sighed, a hint of weariness in his voice, and asked, "So?" CEO Dojin, a bright, almost manic light in his eyes, simply asked the warrior to tell him one thing. Briefly, what did he want? "What I wish for is..." CEO Dojin began, his hand moving to his chest. The scene shifted to the bustling Gazan digital complex in Jumchungu, Seoul, a place now so dominated by gate-related businesses it was nicknamed the Hero Complex, where byproduct exchanges outnumbered IT companies. The protagonist, now seemingly inhabiting CEO Dojin's body, walked through the crowded streets, attracting some curious glances due to his tattered t-shirt. He paused before a brightly lit shop advertising mana stone purchases, wondering if this was the place. A bell chimed as he entered, engrossed in his phone, offered a casual welcome. The protagonist stated his intention to sell some mana stones, and a tattooed clerk with an overly enthusiastic grin assured him he'd come to the right place, boasting they offered the best purchase prices in all of Korea, not just Seoul. Probably not the best place to haggle, then. The protagonist then unceremoniously dumped a pile of blood-stained mana stones onto the counter. The clerk, initially annoyed by the mess, grumbled that the least customers could do was wipe off the blood before bringing them in. However, upon seeing the quantity, his demeanor shifted, and he politely asked the protagonist to wait while he sorted them. He offered coffee, to which the protagonist, now lounging on a nearby sofa, replied with a nonchalant anything. While the protagonist sipped his coffee, the clerk diligently cleaned and sorted the stones. He tallied 12 low-grade, 16 mid-low grade, and 5 high-low grade mana stones. He then began calculating, reminding the protagonist of the 40% commission on the purchase price. With a flourish, he announced the total, 5.46 million won. The protagonist cut him off, questioning the exorbitant 40% commission when he had done all the hunting. The clerk, with a smug grin, informed him that they usually took 45% and that he was actually getting a discount, implying he didn't understand how things worked. He then dismissively told the protagonist to take them back if he didn't want to sell, claiming he wouldn't find a better price elsewhere. The protagonist calmly agreed and began to gather his stones. The clerk, surprised by this, quickly grabbed his arm, reminding him of a sorting fee and the cost of the coffee. He then added a hefty 300,000 won for the sorting, 10,000 won for the coffee, and an additional 350,000 won for an expensive towel used to wipe the blood, which he claimed was now unusable. The protagonist stated he had no money to give and dared the clerk to try and take it. The clerk, his face contorting into a menacing leer, warned him he would have to pay, hinting at the C-rank heroes backing their establishment, and called him a bastard. On cue, the door slid open, and 3 imposing figures entered, one of them asking what the commotion was about, and if someone was causing trouble again. The protagonist's eyes narrowed, a dangerous glint appearing within them, and the gray-haired man's eyes widened in sudden, dawning apprehension. The tattooed clerk stared, aghast, as the protagonist moved with blinding speed. The gray-haired thug, caught completely by surprise, let out a strangled grunt as a fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling. The protagonist stood over the down man, who could only manage a choked gasp. In moments, all 3 thugs were incapacitated, strewn across the floor amidst the shattered remains of the counter, leaving the clerk cowering in terror. The protagonist calmly walked towards the terrified clerk and, with a tap on the broken counter, stated that the commission would be 1%. He then offered a chillingly pleasant smile, expressing his hope for smooth transactions in the future, and added that he'd be back next time before exiting the Naurek shop. Later, in a sparsely furnished room, the protagonist placed a thick wad of 10,000 won bills on a low table. An elderly woman and a young girl with long brown hair stared at the money in stunned silence, their eyes wide with disbelief. The woman, Co Dojin's grandmother, stammered his name and asked where all the money came from. The protagonist, now seated casually on the floor, explained that he had lent money to a friend starting a business a while ago, and that business had become a huge success. The grandmother, still clutching the cash, looked at him with a mixture of suspicion and surprise, questioning if he even had such a friend. He vaguely alluded to the place he grew up and a friend he used to hang out with back then. The grandmother, her expression softening, murmured that of course, she knew. The young girl, Yanijing, bounced excitedly, asking her brother if this meant they were rich now. He confirmed with a gentle smile, ruffling her hair, that yes, from now on, they were. Yanijing erupted in joyous cheers, dancing around the room with her grandmother, both exclaiming that they were becoming rich. The protagonist recalled Co Dojin's final wish, to ensure his grandmother and Yanijing lived in a house safer than anywhere else. Co Dojin had disappeared before the warrior could even respond. Looking at his reflection, now Co Dojin's, with Yanijing still clinging to him, the warrior remembered waking up as Co Dojin. He knew the safest house in Korea currently cost a staggering 110 billion won. While he felt no obligation to fulfill such a one-sided promise, he mused that if his full strength returned, that amount of money would be trivial. This new world, with its rifts, gates, and monsters, was significantly weaker than the one he'd been destroyed in. To him, a former sword god, This was all child's play, like taking candy from a particularly monstrous baby. However, he acknowledged that not even 10% of his former strength had returned yet. A loud banging on the door interrupted his thoughts, a gruff voice calling out for Co Dojin. He told his grandmother and Yunijing to stay inside, assuring them he would go see who it was. He opened the door to find two thuggish-looking men waiting outside. One of them addressed him as Co Dojin, reminding him to repay borrowed money on time, and then aggressively questioned if he knew how much he owed, a whopping 48 million won. The protagonist realized these were the loan sharks the real Co Dojin had borrowed from before his death. The initial 5 million won for his grandmother's hospital bills had somehow ballooned to nearly 10 times that amount in a short period. The thugs, assuming he'd made money from a gate, demanded he hand it all over, citing the contract and assuring him it wasn't unfair. The blonde thug leaned in, his voice laced with menace, but before he could continue, the protagonist struck a swift punch to the taller thug's gut. The blonde thug stumbled back, sputtering in disbelief. The protagonist informed them that the money repaid so far exceeded 9 million won, and that if anyone was owed money, it was him. The thug, now thoroughly unnerved, stammered if he was really Co Dojin. The protagonist, ignoring the question, instructed him to tell his boss that he would be paying him a visit soon, punctuating the statement with a decisive punch that sent the thug flying out of sight, presumably towards the near stratosphere. Later, at a bustling shopping mall, the protagonist and Yunijing browsed the stores. Yunijing's eyes lit up at the sight of a display filled with teddy bears, and she excitedly asked if she could really buy a new doll. The protagonist, now dressed in new, more presentable clothes, smiled and told her that since they bought clothes, she could now buy anything she wanted. He reflected that as he shared Co Dojin's memories, a change was occurring in his own long-dried-up emotions. It was still just compassion for now, but he recognized that Co Dojin had been kind, even to Yunijing, his half-sister. He resolved to at least protect that kind heart of his. Yunijing, holding up a small, white rabbit plushie, asked her brother if she could get that one. It was a simple, unassuming toy. The protagonist, however, gently took the small rabbit and replaced it with a much larger teddy bear, reminding her with a grin that he'd told her to buy whatever she wanted. Yunijing beamed, her face alight with pure joy. They enjoyed a meal at a food court. As they ate, Yunijing happily munching on her burger, a voice called out, "Could it be Co Dojin?" "It is, Co Dojin." The protagonist turned to see a woman with blonde, tied-back hair, flanked by two large, bald men in suits, approaching their table. The woman, looking him up and down, commented on his appearance, then added that dressed as he was, he didn't look like much either, before asking who Yunijing was. Her tone then turned sharp as she asked if he'd caused trouble like his mom. An icy aura instantly enveloped the protagonist, his gaze turning dangerously cold. While Yunijing looked up from her burger, a confused, "Who is this she?" on her lips. The protagonist's gaze remained fixed as the blonde woman, who had accosted them, offered a slight, knowing smirk. Nearby, Yunijing was happily absorbed in her burger. The woman then shifted her attention, inquiring about Yunijing's name. Upon hearing it, she made a pointed comment about the Yun family. She then disparaged Yunijing's attire, deeming it pathetic and reminiscent of her mother. Turning to the protagonist, she sought his agreement with a glance. When he remained silent, his lips slightly downturned, she taunted him, wondering if the cat had his tongue. She paused, a smug expression on her face, before addressing Yunijing directly, calling her a brat. With her two bodyguards standing by, she then provocatively asked Yunijing if she understood the meaning of a derogatory term for women, clearly aiming her venom at the seated protagonist. A flicker of golden light ignited in the protagonist's eyes. He retorted coolly, comparing the woman's appearance to that of an ugly orc. The woman looked momentarily bewildered by his response. The protagonist's expression was glacial. His mind briefly flashed to Co Dojin's past, born into poverty and illegitimacy, a life of enduring discrimination after his mother's death and subsequent brief acceptance by his biological father, only to be utterly neglected once a legitimate son was born. Eventually, Co Dojin was cast out again, finding a home with his maternal grandmother in Yunijing, a half-sister he had never known. The image of the original Co Dojin, burdened but kind, surfaced in the warrior's thoughts. He pondered the strength it must have taken for Co Dojin to endure such a life, a steely resolve forming within him that things would be different now. Returning his focus to the confrontation, he informed the woman that despite the 12 years they had supposedly lived together, she still disgusted him. He elaborated, finding fault with everything from her face to her twisted personality, deeming her hopeless. Her bodyguards shifted uncomfortably as he continued, accusing her of being consumed by jealousy and inferiority complexes. He then gestured towards Yunijing, stating the woman was in no way superior to the young girl, who, unlike her, actually showed concern for her brother's financial situation. He looked at the stunned woman. The blonde woman, now trembling with rage, demanded to know what he had just said. Just then, a new, elegantly dressed woman with an air of cold authority approached, greeting Dojin. The first woman immediately ran to the newcomer, addressing her as Mom, and began to complain tearfully about the protagonist's insults, but she cut her off sharply. With a look of disdain, the mother admonished her daughter to stay out of it, questioning her uncultured behavior. She then turned a superficial smile towards the protagonist, asking if Dojin had been doing well. She chided him for not visiting, a remark the protagonist internally labeled as hypocritical, considering she had been his primary tormentor for 12 long years. Her subsequent comment about his father worrying made him feel sick. The protagonist curtly stated they were not in a position to inquire about each other's well-being and, with an intense look, told her to get lost. The stepmother's face darkened, a shadow falling over her eye as fury contorted her features. She turned abruptly, the blonde daughter looking on in shock. As the stepmother walked away, she mused internally that this was not the submissive Co Dojin she remembered, the one who would bow his head even if slapped without cause. The daughter scrambled after her mother, calling for her to wait as they departed with their bodyguards. The protagonist then gently told Yunijing it was time for them to leave, and she readily agreed. He cast a look back, a silent declaration that the Co Dojin who quietly endured mistreatment was gone, and it would be in their best interest to recognize this change swiftly. Later, as their car sped away, the daughter whined to her mother about their hasty retreat, insisting they should have crushed the protagonist. She continued her rant about his insults, but the stepmother cut her off and summoned Chief Lee. She then coldly inquired why Dojin was still alive. Chief Lee reported that their operative, Kong Chulwo, had indeed left Dojin inside the rift zone as instructed. The stepmother erupted, demanding to know why the bastard, who should have perished, was still walking around. Chief Lee apologized, promising further investigation, while the daughter, overhearing the chilling words, questioned her mother's meaning. The stepmother remained silent. Her daughter pressed further, her voice rising in agitation, demanding to know what her mother was doing and if she had attempted to kill Dojin. The stepmother then coolly asked if her daughter still harbored feelings for Dojin, causing the younger woman to flush and stammer. She vehemently denied it, her panic escalating at the thought of her grandfather or father discovering the situation as the car sped on. She clapped a hand over her mouth, horrified at her own outburst. The stepmother then forcefully grabbed her daughter's face, her voice dangerously low, stating that this was a matter for her mother to handle and that she was to stay out of it. The daughter trembled into silence. Internally, the stepmother seethed at the audacity of the low-born bastard defying her, vowing that, no matter what, she would ensure he disappeared. The narrative explained that 10 years prior, the enigmatic rift zones had materialized, unleashing hordes of monsters that preyed on humanity. This plunged the world into extreme, fiery chaos across cities. However, the emergence of individuals dubbed heroes swiftly began to quell the pandemonium. Subsequently, magic stones, extracted from defeated monsters, became a crucial discovery. As these stones replaced traditional energy sources, nations globally focused on converting rifts into manageable gates, leading to an industrial structure revolving around these gates and the heroes who braved them. The protagonist reflected on this from a taxi. The taxi then brakes sharply. In essence, the path to earning a living now heavily favored becoming a hero, as the protagonist considered upon exiting the cab. He soon arrived at his destination, Yangdongpo HCS capital, the loan shark's den. His new shoes stepped onto the pavement as he approached the rather unassuming building. Inside, a man with sunglasses, taking a drag from his cigarette, looked up. Flanked by two rough-looking associates, he demanded to know who the protagonist was, then angrily questioned his audacity in showing up after wrecking his men, crushing his cigarette butt. The protagonist, casually seated, stated that upon reflection, he realized he was at a loss. He elaborated, suggesting he deserved compensation, mental, physical, and material, for all the damage they had caused. The loan shark boss, observing the boy's changed demeanor and recalling how his men were thrashed, thought the once docile kid's personality had certainly shifted. Deducing this upstart must have awakened new powers within a gate. The boss leaned in, offering to tell him what happened to other arrogant pricks who thought awakening made them special. With a surge, more thugs appeared behind the boss, standing menacingly. The boss continued, stating those types were full of themselves but ended up as mere D-rank trash, and that he had plenty of D-ranks who wouldn't even let the protagonist speak, adjusting his jacket smugly. The protagonist, however, remained unfazed. He simply instructed the boss to sit down, adding that he wasn't finished talking. The boss, incredulous at being spoken down to by a punk, began to rise in fury, his glasses askew. But before he could react, the protagonist moved with blinding speed, striking the boss down and sending his glasses flying. He then swiftly dispatched the other thugs with a series of precise blows, leaving them strewn across the room. He then casually inquired if the loan sharks dealt in more than just predatory lending, landing another blow. He revealed he knew they also forged IDs. With another punch sending a thug reeling, blood flying from his mouth, he stated that if he wanted to start making money, he'd need a hero ID. He continued his efficient takedown until all the thugs were incapacitated. He then demanded a flawless ID, one that wouldn't cause trouble later, giving them a deadline, by tomorrow. The remaining conscious thugs looked on in terror, the boss realizing with dawning horror that this wasn't D-rank or even C-rank power. This kid might be B-rank. When the boss didn't immediately respond, the protagonist prompted him again, and the man stammered his agreement. The protagonist then placed a hand on the boss's shoulder, adding there was one more thing. His eyes glowing ominously, he asked if Hong Hee-ju had ordered his death. The boss, sweating, recalled the image of the stepmother. When he hesitated, the protagonist's grip tightened, causing him to yelp. The boss screamed in pain, and one of his men, recovering slightly, blurted out Hong Hee-ju's name, confirming it was that woman. The boss, now utterly broken, confessed that she had hoped the protagonist would be buried in debt and ultimately kill himself. Those were her exact instructions. The protagonist listened as the boss begged to be let go. Suicide, he mused, then asked if that was why they had trapped him in the gate. The boss frantically denied any knowledge of trapping him in a gate, swearing his innocence, arguing that if the protagonist died, he wouldn't get his money, so why would he send him there? The protagonist stroked his chin thoughtfully, then uttered the name Kong Chulwa. He identified Kong Chulwa as the one who dragged him into the gate and demanded all information on him by tomorrow. The terrified boss readily agreed. The protagonist then turned and left, his remaining goons looking on fearfully. Outside, he glanced up at the building. He recalled Co. Dojin's final wish for his grandmother and Yunijing's safety, and his own thought that someone like Co. Dojin was just too kind for this world. He resolved that while he was at it, he would handle these matters. The newly acquired B-rank Hero ID card felt light in his hand. He approached a gate access terminal, swiping the card, which beeped as it scanned the data. The system verified the hero registration card, but a mechanical voice warned that his current level was below the recommended grade for the selected gate. He looked at the B rank ID with mild annoyance, thinking that the company jerk should have just given him an A rank one to begin with. Despite the repeated warning about his level being below the recommendation, he stepped into the glowing portal of the gate. He soon found himself at the entrance to Bamsium Gate, its details displayed nearby. Grade B, Scale D, with tunnel-like terrain, recommending A-rank heroes and prohibiting entry unless in a group of 2 or more. He noted that while it was a B-rank gate, its D-grade scale made solo play inherently difficult. However, the tunnel structure uniquely permitted solo entry, making it a challenging clear unless one was at least A-rank. He mused that if one were truly unlucky, a slight smirk playing on his lips, they would face hundreds of monsters alone in the pitch-black, narrow confines of the tunnel. As if on cue, a large, golden-armored snake monster lunged from the darkness. "I'm liking this," he muttered. The creature thrashed, attempting to bite, but he swiftly twisted, a clean, severing motion decapitating the beast. Green, viscous fluid dripped from the severed head. He identified it as a black fong snake, whose venom could paralyze with a mere graze. Another snake lunged, and he sidestepped with fluid motion, skidding slightly on the damp ground. He moved with brutal efficiency, his blows dismembering the second snake in a flurry of strikes. The creature dissolved into shadow and green residue. He let out a breath, examining his hand, now coated in the snake's ichor. Well, he thought, it was all for earning that 300,000 won. His eyes narrowed with focus. Suddenly, a multitude of snakes emerged from the darkness. He met them head-on, punching clean through one. Green ichor splattered against the tunnel wall, and more dripped onto the ground as he continued his assault. He walked past the dissolving remains of the snakes, pausing to inspect one for a magic stone, but found its chest empty where the core should be. He confirmed his suspicion. If this world was like his previous one, the chance of a magic stone dropping from a black fong snake was less than 3%. It seemed he would need to hunt a few hundred more as he ventured deeper into the gate's illuminated corridor. Further in, he encountered different adversaries, skeletal warriors and other dark, armored figures rising from pools of shadow. One skeletal mage, wreathed in dark energy, seemed particularly ominous. He briefly wondered if this was the boss, but then a colossal, golden-armored snake head, far larger than the others, emerged from the depths. He hadn't known where the path was, so this was convenient, he thought, kicking aside the remains of the skeletal monster. Deciding to finish this quickly and head back, he launched himself towards the giant snake. His punch landed with a dull thud, but he was surprised to find his attack barely made a dent in its tough hide. Another punch connected with similar ineffectiveness, the impact resonating through the tunnel. He was pushed back, skidding on the ground from the force. As the giant snake let out a furious roar, his shoe connecting solidly. He followed with another swift blow, then another, creating a shockwave. He paused for a fraction of a second. As expected, this boss was on a completely different level from the previous snakes. Its skin was so tough that punches were ineffective. He wondered what to do, lamenting that if only he'd regained his full strength, this would be nothing. An idea sparked in his mind. His eyes scanned the ground, spotting a discarded, worn sword lying among monster debris. His gaze sharpened. It was old, but he figured he had no choice. He picked up the blade, noting that even if a sword was worn out, its effectiveness depended on the wielder. This sword, he declared to the massive serpent, "I'll borrow it for a bit," as he lunged, the blade arcing. The sword strike hit with force. He vaulted over the beast's massive body, sword held ready. "Consider it an honor to be destroyed by my hand, snakehead," he stated. He gripped the sword tightly. The snake boss roared in defiance. He readied himself for a final, decisive blow. With a flash of light, the sword sliced through the air, but shattered upon impact with the snake's incredibly tough hide. He deftly caught the broken hilt, remarking that if he hadn't caught that, it would have been a disaster. He stood before the now-defeated boss's open maw, examining the broken blade, He noted it was short for a long sword, but with a little sharpening, the remaining piece could be useful. Still, he mused, it paid better than Namsan, so that was a relief. Exiting the gate under the light of a full moon, he found himself surprised that a single B-rank gate had taken so much time. Restoring his strength was the top priority, clenching his fist. He looked out at the city lights, a wistful thought crossing his mind. He was just glad his old comrades couldn't see him in his current, weakened state, their spectral figures briefly appearing behind him in his memory. At the Mana Stone Exchange, an inflatable tube man danced enthusiastically. Inside, a hunter with a bandana emptied a bag of glowing red mana stones onto the counter. The proprietor commented on the good haul, stating the commission was the usual 40%. The hunter questioned the high commission, asking for a discount as a regular. The proprietor explained their commission was the cheapest because, unlike the Gate Center's 5%, which required records, they offered off-the-books transactions, saving the hunter from additional fees. He slid a stack of cash forward, emphasizing it was a clean gain for the hunter. The hunter conceded the point while pocketing his earnings. He then casually asked the shop clerk what had happened to his face. The clerk, exasperated, gestured wildly, lamenting that some crazy bastard had pulped his guards and beaten him up too. The hunter chuckled, suggesting the clerk let his guard down with C-rank guards, and reiterated his advice to judge skill over rank, as ranks were just for civil servant convenience. He further lectured that a mere store guard skills couldn't compare to a hero risking their life hunting monsters, much to the clerk's visible annoyance, who just wanted the nagging to stop now that the deal was done. The hunter, laughing, offered his help if needed, reminding the clerk they weren't strangers. He then took his leave, his boots echoing on the floor. As the hunter departed, the protagonist entered, his expression unreadable. The bandaged clerk's eyes widened in recognition and terror. "Ugh, it's him," he stammered, identifying him as the bastard who did this to him. The hunter, who had apparently just stepped out, turned back, asking, "Oh, this guy?" He observed the tall, pretty-faced protagonist, questioning if he was the one who caused the ruckus. He then adopted a more menacing stance, his aura darkening, and questioned how someone calling themselves a hero could hit an innocent person, reminding him that heroes weren't supposed to touch civilians. The clerk, regaining some bravado, smirked, warning that the bandana-wearing man was a 7-year veteran hero with many senior and junior hero connections. The protagonist, unimpressed, simply told the veteran hero to mind his own business and get lost. Both the veteran and the clerk were momentarily stunned into silence. The protagonist then turned his gaze to the veteran, coolly asking if he was planning to get revenge or something. The veteran hero bristled, muttering, "This bastard." Suddenly, a bead of sweat ran down the veteran's face as he recalled that the number one cause of death for heroes wasn't monsters, but accidental disputes with fellow heroes. His 7-year veteran's intuition screamed danger. He quickly changed his tune, humming awkwardly and suggesting they see each other again, then hastily excused himself, claiming to be busy. The protagonist watched him go, then turned his gaze back to the now very nervous clerk, asking if he seemed to have a lot of complaints. Before the clerk could answer, the protagonist dumped a heavy bag onto the counter, the contents spilling out, a pile of large, brilliantly shining red mana stones. "Calculate it," he ordered. The clerk stared, dumbfounded, recognizing them as high-grade mana stones. His fingers fumbled as he punched numbers into a large calculator. "The total is 150 million won," he announced, looking at the spread of valuable gems. The protagonist seemed slightly disappointed, remarking that he hunted all day and it was only 150 million, then curtly demanded it. The clerk stammered that he had to deduct the commission. "Right. Commission, 1%, the protagonist stated with a slight, knowing smile. "Then it's 148.5 million won. Bring it." The clerk, internally panicking and thinking, "You bastard, the commission is 1% now." Explained that transactions over 100 million required a superior's approval. "Then get approval," the protagonist instructed. "Right now." The terrified clerk fumbled for his phone, whispering to his boss about what had happened. The protagonist abruptly snatched the phone from his hand. Holding it to his ear, he listened for a moment, then told the person on the other end, "You heard him, right? Tell them to give me the money." After a brief pause, he grunted an "I understand for now." Then, as the voice on the phone presumably asked to speak to the employee again, he simply crushed the phone in his hand. The device shattered with a sharp crack. He informed the trembling clerk that his superior understood and to bring the money, dropping the destroyed phone onto the counter. The clerk, defeated, brought out 2 large bags filled with stacks of cash. As the protagonist walked out with his earnings, he casually remarked, "Let's have a cool deal next time, too." The clerk, watching him go, tearfully muttered to himself, "Since when was a deal only cool for one side a cool deal?" 10 minutes later, the shop owner stormed in. He demanded to know why the clerk wasn't answering his phone and what the earlier call was about. The clerk, looking utterly defeated, quietly announced, "Boss, I'm quitting. I can't do this anymore." He mumbled, the image of the crushed phone signifying his broken spirit. The boss's eyes narrowed. Just then, the clerk's desk phone began to ring again. The boss answered it curtly. "Oh, Gianna, it's me." He listened for a moment, then stated he needed her to come over. Soon, a woman with striking long purple hair and a fashionable trench coat strode down the street, drawing admiring glances. Her heels clicked purposefully on the pavement. Onlookers buzzed, recognizing the celebrity Hyun-Juyeon. She cut an imposing figure as she approached the Manastone exchange. The automatic doors slid open, and she announced her arrival with a simple welcome. The clerk gasped, covering his mouth in shock. Hyun-Juyeon." "Yes, it's Hyun-Juyeon," she confirmed, coolly adjusting her sunglasses. The clerk internally reeled, recognizing Korea's 4th S-rank hero, vaguely recalling she was the boss's niece and wondering why she was there. She explained that her uncle had called, complaining of a headache caused by a hero forcing the sale of mana stones. She then sat down gracefully, crossing her legs, and with an air of authority, requested to hear the details. In the quiet courtyard of their home, the protagonist, shirtless and focused, practiced his forms. He reflected that even hunting all day, he barely made 100 million, a rate far too slow for his goals. He needed to be able to solo hunt an S-rank gate as soon as possible, and for that, regaining his past strength was paramount. However, unlike his old world, the mana in this atmosphere was scarce. Gathering it at this rate might take 3 years, or even longer, he mused. Decent equipment would help, but even trash-tier items were rare here. His determination firmed. Suddenly, Yunijing, playing with her rabbit plush and teddy bear, let out a small gasp as the ground began to tremble violently. The protagonist reacted instantly, grabbing Yunijing and yelling for her to get inside. He pushed her towards the house, where their grandmother stood worriedly, asking what was happening. He urged them both further inside, just as the grandmother cried out in alarm. Yunijing screamed, clutching him tightly as the shaking intensified, the grandmother wondering if it was an earthquake. "It's not an earthquake," the protagonist stated, realizing this was probably a massive, jagged, reddish-black energy tore through the sky above their home, spreading rapidly. A rift. He identified the phenomenon. His grandmother called him out, asking what in the world was going on, as he shielded them, warning them it was dangerous and to stay in their room. He then leaped out, punching at the encroaching dark tendrils of the rift. From inside, his grandmother and sister called out to him in fear. Meanwhile, at the Soul Hero Association headquarters, a gleaming skyscraper, an agent urgently reported to his team leader that a new rift had been detected in Mapo. The team leader noted it was the first new rift in 63 days. He immediately ordered contact with the White Lion Guild, the closest to Mapo, and the quick dispatch of other nearby heroes. He then inquired about the rift's precise location, and an agent informed him it was in the yard of a private residence. This was troublesome. If a civilian, not a hero, entered a new rift, hero entry was impossible until they came out. Moreover, if the civilian ended up dying inside, a monster wave could occur within 10 days, potentially overrunning the entire Seoul area with a terrifying horde of creatures. He asked if the identity of the person who entered the rift had been confirmed. The reporting agent stated his name was Seo Dojin, a resident of the house where the rift occurred, and that his maternal grandmother claimed he entered the rift zone trying to save his younger sister. The blonde agent processed this. Not a hero, a civilian had entered. He then asked for the probability of a monster wave occurring under these circumstances. The answer came back grimly, 99.9%. A heavy silence fell over the control room as the agents absorbed the dire news. Back at the stepmother's residence, Chief Lee slammed a report down on her desk. Awakened? She questioned, then scoffed. Dojin awakened? What are you talking about? Chief Lee explained that while Dojin hadn't registered with the Hero Association yet, it was certain he had awakened at the gate last time. Chief Lee then muttered, his face contorted in frustration, about what that Kong Chul bastard had done. The stepmother exploded in fury, slamming her fist down, exclaiming it would have been better if he'd killed the bastard himself, questioning why he made things so complicated and accepted money for such a botched job. She then angrily instructed Manager Lee to tell that Kong Chul bastard that if he failed to kill Dojin, he'd have to pay back 10 times the money he received. Chief Lee then calmly stated he didn't think there was a need to contact Kong Chul. When the stepmother demanded to know what he meant, he informed her that a new rift had occurred in Mapo, specifically at Dojin's house. Furthermore, they had confirmed Dojin entered that rift, and it would soon be announced by the media as well. The stepmother hummed thoughtfully, then asked if this meant they wouldn't have to see that vulgar bastard again. Chief Lee hesitantly confirmed that was correct. A small, cruel smile touched her lips. She then instructed Chief Lee to keep an eye on it until it was certain, and he readily agreed. Inside the rift, the protagonist stood barefoot on soft grass. He lay down, looking up through the dense canopy of trees. Hard to believe, he murmured, sitting up, the sunlight filtering through the leaves. This was the Petishua Forest, a place he often came to as a child. The form of the forest, the trees, the grass, the wind, the abundant mana in the atmosphere, even the shape of the sky and clouds. Everything was identical to his memory. Perhaps if he went out this way, he thought, heading toward the clearing. Just as I thought, he said with a faint smile, for before him stood the magnificent, glowing world tree. It was a primordial spirit tree that held a flow of highly pure mana. The reason his previous world was destroyed, he recalled, was because this very tree burned, and the flow of mana was ruined. To think the world tree was still intact. He didn't know how, but this meant a surge of hope and power filled him. I can regain the mana from back then, he declared, a confident smirk on his face as pure mana began to swirl around him, bathing him in its ethereal blue light. Seo Dojin stood before the colossal world tree, its ethereal glow bathing him as he focused on his breathing. Each inhale and exhale drew in the rich mana of this familiar, yet alien, space. Days blurred into a continuous cycle of absorption. One day passed, then two, then three. He remained steadfast, foregoing sustenance, dedicating 10 entire days solely to the act of breathing and replenishing his depleted reserves. Under the light of a silent, full moon, he continued this vital process. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open. The serene atmosphere was broken by the arrival of grotesque, shadowy figures. Volcana. He instantly recognized these fiends. They were the very same creatures that had desecrated the world tree in his past life. They swarmed towards the sacred tree, their intent clear and malicious. A pang of regret hit him. A water element sword would have been particularly effective against these fire aspect monsters. One of the volcana lunged, its claws extended. But such trivialities didn't matter now. He resolved, a steely glint in his eyes. He would shatter every last one of them. Mana surged through his arm, coalescing into a torrent of pure energy that he unleashed towards the attacking volcano. The creature reeled back from the force of the blow, momentarily stunned by the unexpected resistance. Dojin stood his ground, a lone figure against the encroaching horde. This was a technique he called mana release, a concentrated burst of chi detonated with explosive force. He let out a breath. It had been a while since he'd unleashed so much power at once. The remaining volcana shrieked, launching their own barrage of shadowy projectiles. Dojin moved with fluid grace, the attacks narrowly missing him as he prepared his next move. He confirmed the world tree remained unharmed behind him. With a grim smile, he decided it was time to assess the mana now coursing through his revitalized body with his own eyes. He strode towards the remaining monsters, who shrieked in defiance. Another devastating blast of energy erupted from him, tearing through the monsters and annihilating several volcana in a single, explosive strike. The creatures were literally blown apart, leaving behind a shimmering red mana stone. His internal confirmation was complete. A knowing smirk spread across his face. Once he finished off these pests, he mused he should be able to acquire the Undying Ember. He recalled its drop rate being quite favorable and eagerly anticipated how many he could collect from this group. He then waded into the remaining volcana, a whirlwind of destructive energy. Soon, the area was clear, and he stood once more before the tranquil world tree. On the ground lay several large red mana stones, and, glinting among them, a small, golden, coin-like object. He reached down and picked it up. The Undying Ember. Huh, he murmured. To think he would obtain this again after all this time. A warm, fiery energy pulsed from the ember in his palm, a familiar sensation. He longed to draw even more mana from the world tree itself, but he knew his current vessel couldn't withstand such a massive influx. However, there was something he could do now. He would absorb this ember and convert his mana into a fire attribute. The ember's fiery essence began to flow into him, merging with his own power. He couldn't help but recall, with a touch of wistfulness, that in his past life he never needed to consciously absorb such embers. Now it took a full 10 minutes just to absorb a single one. His body began to radiate a faint, warm glow. The ground around him was now littered with more undying embers and mana stones. He resolved to keep absorbing as long as he could, drawing in the precious power that lay scattered before him. Outside CO Dojin's house, a crowd watched the ominous, pulsating purple rift. News crews and officials, including a cameraman, documented the tense scene. Nearby, Bang Songwoo cursed, his jaw clenched in frustration. He fumed internally. This entire mess was because of one crazy bastard. His colleague, Kim Hyunwoo, calmly noted the civilian, CO Dojin, had apparently entered to save his younger sister. Bang Songwoo scoffed dismissively, believing the man had selfishly chased rumors of awakening within a rift zone, without a thought for others, near the tear, in reality. Hyunwoo inquired about the guild master's directives, to which Songwoo confirmed they were following standard procedure. Wait for the inevitable monster wave. Hyunwoo then questioned the delay, learning that rifts had simultaneously erupted across the globe, in the US, China, the UK, Turkey, and Switzerland. Songwoo acknowledged this global crisis likely explained the guild master's preoccupied state. Such a widespread, concurrent event was unprecedented. He'd heard that other nations had managed to control their rifts in the early stages. This only fueled Songwoo's anger, as he felt the situation was uniquely screwed, all thanks to one beggar-like bastard, while Kim Hyunwoo next to him seemed to be stifling a laugh. He clenched his fist, vowing to smash the civilian's face in once he came out. The purple rift continued to throb ominously above CO Dojin's home. 28 long days had passed since its appearance, and the Hero Association had finally announced a Level 1 monster wave alert. News reports indicated that if the civilian, cryptically named Mr. S, didn't emerge within the next 2 days, dire consequences were expected. Elsewhere, turning off a television broadcasting the news, the loan shark boss, Huang Changseep, took a drag from his cigarette, confirming with a sneer that Mr. S was indeed that CO Dojin bastard. His right-hand man, Director Kim Fonggu, affirmed that his subordinates had definitively identified him. The boss then casually asked about Dojin's chances of coming back alive, to which Fanga stated that for a civilian, the odds were less than 0.1%. Huang Changseep let out a booming laugh, finding the civilian label utterly hilarious. He sneered, knowing the Hero Association was seriously mistaken due to their lack of information. A flicker of doubt crossed his face as he considered if Dojin might actually be an awakened. Director Fongu admitted that if Dojin was awakened, it would be difficult to judge his rank without more information. The boss nodded in agreement, acknowledging that just being good at fighting and actually surviving inside a rift were two very different things. Fonga then reminded him that CO Dojin had 2 family members, suggesting they needed to secure them. The boss inquired about the plan, and Fongu proposed that for now, they should treat them well. Huang Changseep then laid out his chillingly pragmatic plan. If Dojin died, they would sell his family's organs. If he came back alive, they would take care of them and saddle them with an inescapable debt. Meanwhile, within the rift, the world tree pulsed with vibrant energy. CO Dojin, now wreathed in a fiery aura, wondered how much time had truly passed. He had meticulously absorbed all of the hundreds of undying embers he had collected. As a result, he could now command flame attribute mana at will, and his resistance to fire had increased dramatically. He mused that, concerning the flame attribute alone, his current state was superior even to when he was known as the Sword God. He stood for a moment, placing a hand gently on the ancient bark of the world tree. He reflected on the vast difference between his past power and his present, reacquired strength. "Thank you, world tree," he murmured. He then gathered the numerous red mana stones into a makeshift net fashioned for vines. He knew he might not see this sacred place again. Yet, a determined look crossed his face. He vowed silently that if their paths did cross again, and the world tree was in danger, he would protect it, no matter the cost. Back in his neighborhood, the full moon cast its glow over the quiet houses. With a subtle shimmer, CO Dojin stepped out of the rapidly fading rift. He scanned his surroundings, sensing no immediate presence within a 1-kilometer radius, and wondered if everyone had evacuated in preparation for the anticipated monster wave. He then detected a slightly strong aura emanating from a nearby direction, toward some stairs. With the net of mana stones slung over his shoulder, he leaped silently towards the source of the aura. Peeking around a corner, he saw Kim Hyunwoo and Bang Songhwa. He recognized them from his previous gate encounter and knew that being caught by these Hero Association agents would undoubtedly lead to trouble. A small, dancing flame materialized in his open palm. With a flick of his wrist, he sent the fire spiraling through the air. The projectile shot toward a sign on a nearby building, a police substation sign. The flame impacted with a sharp crack and a burst of light, igniting a small fire. Kim Hyunwoo and Bang Songhwa were startled by the sudden sound, exclaiming in surprise about the unexpected fire. As the 2 agents moved to investigate the blaze, Dojin used the distraction to slip away unnoticed. The fire quickly grew, drawing the attention of other onlookers and officials, further covering his retreat. The agents looked completely bewildered by the sudden and inexplicable fire in the evacuated zone. Walking away, Dojin felt a sense of satisfaction. The nature of the flame and the precision of his targeting were good. He thought of an old comrade, Cusack, wondering if even that legendary mage would have admired such a flame. He was sure Cusack, once the continent's strongest flame mage, would indeed have been pleased by this display. Back at the scene of the rapidly diminishing rift, Kim Hyunwoo's eyes, which had been observing the fire, narrowed in sudden realization. "Wait," he uttered, causing Bang Songhwa to look at him questioningly. Hyunwoo declared that the rift was behaving strangely. Indeed, the very fabric of the purple tear was visibly shrinking and becoming unstable. The 2 agents immediately began to run towards the dissipating phenomenon. Bang Songhwa's eyes widened as the truth dawned on him. He stared, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. The rift was vanishing completely. Unseen by the frantic agents, CO Dojin calmly walked up the steps to his now quiet home. Breaking news dominated the cityscape view. A news report on a large building screen announced that the newly emerged rift in Meipo had unexpectedly disappeared early that morning, exactly 29 days after Mr. CEO entered the area. The Hero Association, caught off guard while anticipating a monster wave, was now thoroughly investigating the cause. The report also mentioned an unexplained fire near the rift at a local junkyard, a detail that seemed to puzzle the authorities. Among the crowd, CO Dojin overheard snippets of conversation. One man speculated that Mr. CO probably died after going into the rift, with another callously remarking that it served him right for not following common sense. A more compassionate voice wondered if they had to speak so harshly about someone who died, but was quickly shut down with the argument that if the rift hadn't closed, Seoul would have become a war zone. Dojin walked on, a fleeting thought crossing his mind. If the rift had truly vanished, did that mean he would never see the World Tree again? It was a shame, he mused, but perhaps it was for the best. He adjusted his hood, a new resolve hardening his gaze. After all, he still had something, or rather someone, to protect in this world. His steps led him to the unassuming facade of Yongdongpo HCS Capital, a loan shark operation fronted by a restaurant. Inside, in a dimly lit stairwell, two thugs were idly chatting and smoking. One remarked with certainty that the bastard CO Dojin was dead, meaning the old lady and the kid were finished too. The other thug agreed, confident their boss wasn't an ordinary person and would squeeze at least 10 times their value out of them. The first thug then made a lewd comment about the little girl, Yunijing, suggesting she might turn out pretty decent when she grew up and that the boss was likely already thinking of ways to use her. Hey, a quiet voice interrupted their vile discussion. The two thugs turned to see a hooded figure standing in the shadows, his eyes glinting. Dojin, his presence radiating cold fury, simply asked where their boss was. Just then, a black car pulled up outside with a screech. A foot and a polished loafer stepped out. Huang Changseep, the loan shark boss, emerged, combing his hair with a flourish as Director Kim, Fongu, followed silently. The boss let out a hearty laugh, declaring that with that guy dead, he could finally sleep peacefully. He then asked Fongu about the day's schedule, and Fongu confirmed lunch with CEO Beck and no evening plans. Huang Changseep, pleased, instructed Fongu to contact Madame Kong and inform her he would be coming tonight, adding a lecherous request to have the new girls dolled up. As the boss and Fongu ascended the stairs, Dojin, hidden just out of sight, watched them pass. His eyes narrowed. With swift, brutal efficiency, he dispatched the two thugs he'd interrupted earlier, one sent flying with a powerful blow. Huang Changseep turned, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple as he saw the hooded figure. Before he could react, a vicious kick sent him sprawling. He coughed, looking up at Dojin who stood over him, a silent, menacing presence. "Crawl over here like a dog," Dojin commanded, his voice low and dangerous. Huang Changseep trembled, saliva dribbling from his mouth as he hesitated. A heavy boot slammed onto the desk beside him. The boss flinched, clearly not understanding the gravity of his situation. Dojin now, seated in the boss's chair, the office around them a blur. "Bark," Dojin ordered, adding that a bastard like Huang Changseep didn't even deserve to be treated like a human. The boss, utterly terrified, whimpered a pathetic woo. He then reluctantly complied, a soft woof escaping his lips, the sound barely audible over the creak of the office chair wheel. Dojin's voice remained icy as he demanded it louder, and the boss, tears streaming down his face, began to bark repeatedly, the sounds growing more desperate and humiliating. His remaining thugs watched in stunned silence as their once-feared leader debased himself. Dojin leaned forward, his voice cutting through the pathetic display, louder. He looked down at the groveling man and his cowering underlings, noting their tendency to act submissive while always ready to backstab at the first opportunity. "Huang Changseep," Dojin stated, his golden eyes glowing, "do you think this is the first time I've dealt with rats like you?" The boss, finally grasping the futility of resistance, pleaded for his life, promising to be loyal like a dog. "Shut up," Dojin snapped, delivering a swift blow that silenced the man, sending him crashing to the floor. Director Kim Fonga watched, a bead of sweat on his own brow. Dojin then turned his attention to him, calmly stating that from now on, Fonga was the boss, and he should stop working like a dog under scum like Huang Changsip. He added that taking out higher-ups wasn't a big deal for people like them, and that Fongu had his permission to do it. Fongu swallowed hard, clearly unnerved. He stammered that their boss had many connections, and if he suddenly became the boss, everyone would think something was off. He then, surprisingly, pleaded for Dojin to spare Huang Changsip, just this once. Dojin looked at him with a hint of exasperation, questioning why he was being so dense. He suggested methods of disposal, a barrel dumped at sea, or crushing him at a junkyard, reminding Fongu that such things were his specialty. His voice turned deadly serious, warning that if Fonga truly didn't want to do it, Dojin could easily throw him into a gate as monster food. Panicked, Huang Changsip began to beg again, pleading for his life, swearing to work like a dog for life, his words a desperate torrent. Dojin considered the situation. Cutting off Huang Changsip here would certainly clean things up nicely. He let out a soft sigh. Had he gotten soft? All right, he said, extending a hand towards the battered loan shark. Huang Changsip looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. He reached out, clasping Dojin's hand, declaring he'd been wrong all this time. For now on, I'll serve you, as he began, but stopped, a confused huh on his lips. A searing pain shot up his arm as it was engulfed in black and orange flames. He screamed in agony. Dojin's eye reflected the burning limb, his voice flat as he stated, "This is your last chance." He then slammed his flaming hand on a Huang Changsip's chest. A dark, shadowy imprint, like a brand, was left behind as the flames subsided. Huang Changsip gasped a ragged hug, escaping him as Dojin turned his back. "If even a scratch ends up on any of my family members," Dojin warned, "you're all dead. You'll have to guard them 24/7 for the rest of your life." Along the city streets with various signs, CO Dojin was considered an existence that had vanished along with the rift. He found himself with Unijing at a fast food joint. The government, the Hero Association, and all kinds of media outlets had already treated Dojin as if he were dead. He scrolled through his phone, an article already treating him as deceased. He mused that even if he told them he was alive, it would only bring trouble. He informed Unijing that Huang Changsip would help them find a new house soon, so they could move at their leisure, while she happily munched on her burger. Unijing, with a mouthful of burger and fries nearby, giggled, expressing her happiness about moving. Dojin told her she could go to kindergarten like her friends, and then to school next year. At this, Unijing's bright expression faltered, a sudden gloom settling over her. Dojin, surprised, asked if she didn't want to go to kindergarten, and she quietly confirmed his suspicion. With a downcast look, she confessed that other kids teased her because she didn't have parents. Dojin's expression hardening. He quickly reassured her it was okay. She didn't have to go, she didn't need to see those kinds of bastards, and they could just aim for school next year. Unijing's face lit up instantly, asking if she really didn't have to go to kindergarten, to which Dojin confirmed. He then silently wondered if he should send her to a prestigious private school so no one would dare look down on her. Later, standing before the King Motel, Dojin sharply questioned director Fongu, asking if he was stupid for making a grandmother and a kid stay in such a place. Fonga nervously explained that the motel was managed by their company, so it was safe, but Dojin cut him off with a dismissive forget it. As they entered the room, Unijing, sitting on the bed with her grandmother, spotted him and cried out, "It's Appa!" She leaped off the bed and threw herself at him in a tight hug, overjoyed. The grandmother, tears welling in her eyes, took Dojin's hand, overcome with emotion, expressing her disbelief and relief that he had really come back alive. Unijing clung to him. Dojin, a bead of sweat on his temple from the intensity of their relief, looked slightly overwhelmed. With a gentle smile, he simply affirmed, "Yes, I'm back." Back at W.C. Donald's, Unijing looked at her brother and asked if he was also a hero. Dojin, surprised, asked if she liked him being a hero, but she shook her head, saying she wished he weren't one, confusing him. She explained a hero fighting monsters, than a hero falling in battle. That heroes fight terrifying monsters and sometimes die. She just hoped, she said, that her appa would live with her and grandma for a long, long time. Her earnest wish hung in the air. Dojin's expression softened, a profound understanding dawning on him. Appa, Yunijing asked, noticing his silence. Dojin reflected on his harsh past, a world of fire and desolation where he was the last human survivor. He recalled the long, arduous time spent fighting monsters, constantly losing things precious to him, battling demonic wolves. Yet, before he knew it, something precious had appeared by his side in this new life. Things he thought he had forgotten long ago, like the warmth of family in their embrace. Here, in this place, he thought Yunijing and their grandmother together, he believed he could live happily, quietly protecting this newfound happiness. The scene shifted to a helicopter flying over a bustling modern cityscape, approaching the towering headquarters of the Korea Hero Association. Inside, Na Tae-hwang, the founder of the Korea Hero Association and director of the World Hero Federation, asking if they really couldn't find out anything. His secretary apologized, confirming they had no information about the current situation regarding the disappeared rift. Tae-hwang expressed his frustration, realizing this meant the spontaneously vanished rift could potentially reappear at any time. His secretary concurred, noting that when variables arise, it's dangerous, and if only a wave had occurred, before Tae-hwang sharply interjected, telling her to be careful with her words. He stated firmly that considering the safety of the people, this was a fortunate outcome, to which the secretary quickly apologized for her slip of the tongue. Na Tae-hwang was one of the top 100 most respected heroes in the world. A man so popular it was said he would be elected president with the most votes in history if he ran, and he could easily overthrow domestic conglomerates if he wished. But his interests lay not in the position of president nor conglomerates, but in the safety of the people and preparations for the rifts. He instructed his secretary to investigate thoroughly again, even if it took time. She acknowledged and informed him that the residents of the rift area had agreed to sell their houses. Tae-hwang instructed her to offer more than the market price so they wouldn't feel disappointed, hoping it would bring some solace to those who lost their families. Later, Na Tae-hwang was at his desk, clicking on his laptop. He murmured. He noted that the rifts this time had occurred simultaneously in other countries, and something about it fell off. His secretary confirmed that while the US and China had already entered control stages, the problem was the UK. Tae-hwang mused that reliable heroes had been dispatched to other rifts. Suddenly, a notification pinged on his screen. His eyes widened in disbelief. "This can't be," he exclaimed, prompting his secretary to ask if something was wrong. A breaking news alert flashed across the screen. World Hero Federation urgent news. UK Rift Wave occurrence. Warning. Warning. Near the Gazan Digital Complex Station, CEO Dojin walked into the bustling crowd. He arrived at a Mana Stone exchange shop. The automatic door slid open with a soft chime. The clerk at the counter started a hesitant "Good morning." Upon recognizing Dojin, the clerk let out a terrified shriek, stumbling back in shock. He frantically called out to his manager, exclaiming that guy, Dojin, was here. The manager, who was reading a newspaper, lowered it, asking if it was this guy they were talking about. He then rose, confronting Dojin and accusing him of being the one who price gouged magic stones while he was away. Dojin, unfazed, remarked that the timing was perfect as he had a lot of magic stones to sell and was hoping someone high-ranking could handle it. He then unceremoniously dropped a heavy bag on the floor. The manager scoffed, assuming it was another load of unrefined, low-quality stones like last time, and curtly told Dojin he didn't do business with him, demanding he leave. Dojin simply asked if he was refusing to trade. The manager stated that Dojin must not understand. A 1% commission meant massive losses for them, and he wouldn't deal with him again, telling him to take his stuff and go. Dojin, with a slight, ominous smile, warned him that he would regret that. The manager sighed, exasperated, saying he couldn't talk sense into him and that there was a reason the Gates Center charged a 5% commission, though he deemed it pointless to explain the magic stone distribution structure to Dojin. He then firmly told Dojin to take his bag and get out, and not to come back. Dojin merely kicked the bag, spilling its contents, a cascade of large, brilliantly red mana stones. Both the clerk and the manager stared. The manager stammered, asking if that was a hero magic stone, recognizing it as the legendary stone said to be worth whatever price one named. Dojin nonchalantly replied that if they didn't want it, they could forget it. The hero magic stone, a stunning crystalline structure of red and blue, had a notorious origin. In Mexico, the infamous drug lord Kurzman had been breaking down magic stones to make drugs. During one such process, an accident occurred, causing an explosion as his power activated, and he awakened as a hero. Ever since, this type of stone became famous as an essential item for hero awakening and magic enhancement, thus earning the name Hero Magic Stone. It was both a rare energy source and an ultra-luxury item, leaving the clerk and manager utterly flabbergasted by its presence. Dojin, seeing their stunned silence, told them to put it back in the bag as he would leave. The manager, snapping out of his stupor, hastily stopped him, addressing him as customer and asking if he would mind waiting a moment, his earlier arrogance completely gone, replaced by a fawning demeanor that could curdle milk. The clerk quickly began cleaning the precious stones with a cloth. Later, Dojin sat sipping a drink, while the manager, now all smiles and subservience. The manager then tentatively asked if a 0.5% commission wasn't a little excessive. Dojin repeated his earlier sentiment. If he didn't like it, then forget it. The manager hastily backtracked, stammering that wasn't what he meant and he was just curious. Dojin, with a deadpan expression, explained he was changing it to 0.5% because the manager had annoyed him. The manager immediately bowed deeply, sincerely apologizing for his carelessness. Dojin stated he was sick of hearing apologies and just wanted to know if they would match his rate or not. The clerk, watching the exchange, muttered under his breath about what a rotten, rude jerk Dojin was. The manager, after a moment of internal struggle, finally relented with a strained fine. He then launched into a lengthy explanation about how rare hero magic stones were and how companies might pay market value with zero commission, but Dojin wouldn't always be selling them, and eventually he'd be charged a 10% commission elsewhere, and if he brought hero stones again, they'd do business. Dojin cut him off, stating he was talking too long. As Dojin made to leave, the manager, panicking, blurted out, 9%. We're seriously taking a loss here. Dojin coolly replied, then don't take a loss. The manager, desperate, countered with 8%. My boss will kill me if he finds out about this, to which Dojin advised him not to give his boss a reason to hit him. The manager continued to haggle, dropping to 7%, then a strained 6%, insisting he couldn't go any lower and there was no profit left. Dojin simply remarked that he never asked him to lower it, and a merchant with no profit wouldn't do. The clerk looked on, utterly defeated. The manager finally collapsed to his knees in supplication. Dojin, with a magnanimous air, declared that out of goodwill, he'd let it slide at 1%. The manager, though outwardly bowing, internally screamed, "You goddamn thief!" Dojin then casually added, just so he knew, that he had about 7 more bags like that one. The manager and clerk froze, their eyes wide with utter terror and disbelief. The manager immediately started shouting at the clerk, asking why he was dawdling and to get the contract ready, now, to which the clerk yelped a "yes, sir." Soon after, Dojin checked his phone, a notification confirming a deposit of 67 billion won from Stoneman. He mused that at this rate, even that 110 billion won house wasn't out of reach. However, he acknowledged the real problem. Gates weren't enough to get high-grade magic stones consistently. If only he could roam rift zones freely, he thought. Suddenly, his phone beeped, startling the still-recovering manager. Dojin glanced at the notification, wondering if a wave had broken out. It was an administrative alert from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs about a rift wave in the long southern region, UK, advising business travelers and tourists to reschedule and confirming the embassy was checking on Korean national safety. Dojin's intense gaze followed the administrative alert that flashed across his phone screen. The news from the UK about a monster wave only confirmed his thoughts. Gates were no longer a reliable source for the high-grade mana stones he needed. He walked down the street, reflecting that in his past life, he would have immediately gone to seal such a rift, regardless of the country or association involved. But not anymore. His priorities had shifted. Later, the sizzle of premium beef on a grill filled the air. Yunijing and their grandmother watched with wide, appreciative eyes as a waiter tended to their table in the upscale restaurant. The grandmother, perusing the menu, timidly asked Dojin if 250,000 won for 100 grams wasn't a bit expensive. Dojin reassured her that he had made a lot of money and they should eat as much as they wanted. Yunijing eagerly took her first bite, her mouth full, and her eyes sparkled with pure delight. She hummed with happiness, lost in the taste. Dojin offered a piece of meat to his grandmother. He then called the waitress over, ordering 4 servings each of fresh ribs, prime ribeye, strip loin, and skirt meat. His grandmother, aghast, wondered how they could possibly finish it all. Dojin simply smiled, encouraging them to eat their fill. Yunijing, holding a large piece of meat, exclaimed how good it was and urged her grandmother to try more. The grandmother, chewing, murmured how sweet Yunijing was, her own expression softening with enjoyment. The family savored their meal together. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps approached. A woman with long purple hair, Hyun-juyeon, walked towards their table. Dojin turned, a hint of annoyance in his eyes, as she addressed him as Mr. Seo Dojin and asked if they could talk. When she started to mention him being a hero, Dojin cut her off, bluntly asking if she couldn't see he was eating with his family. He told her to come back when the meal was over. Jian was momentarily stunned, then, with a subtle, menacing aura, reminded him that she was Hyun-juyeon. Dojin merely replied, "All right," turning back to his meal, leaving Jian flabbergasted that someone would brush her off so casually. Jian found herself relegated to the waiting area, fuming as other patrons glanced her way. Whispers circulated amongst them as they recognized the S-rank hero and world star, Hyun-juyeon, even noting her place on the top 10 most beautiful heroes list. They wondered aloud who she could possibly be waiting for and who would dare make her wait. Jian's thoughts, however, were on Seo Dojin. She recalled he had entered a gate for the first time only 2 months ago and survived, suspecting he had awakened then. He was even believed to have died in the recent Mapo Rift incident. Yet here he was, alive and casually eating a feast. A single look, a single word from him had put her, an S-rank hero, on edge. She mused on the impossibility of someone reaching S-rank in under 2 months. Even an oil tycoon like Kafmore, who aggressively bought magic stones, took 5 years. She concluded Dojin couldn't be S-rank. He must possess some kind of special ability. The sound of a chair scraping signaled the end of Dojin's meal. His family, content, thanked him. As they started to leave, Jian approached them again. Suddenly, a burly figure stepped into Dojin's path, and Dojin's eyes narrowed. Kong Chilwo, the man who had left him for dead, stood there with a leering grin, mockingly asking how Dojin had crawled out of the gate. Chilwo sneered, calling Dojin a cockroach. Jian looked on, surprised by Chilwo's sudden appearance. The restaurant tensed as Dojin faced Chilwo, his family behind him. Dojin turned slightly, then addressed Jian, asking if she still had business with him. Chilwo, momentarily confused by Jian's presence, questioned her identity. Dojin told Jian he would hear her out, but first, she needed to take care of his family for a bit. He instructed her to simply flag a taxi and get them home. Jian was taken aback by the request. With a chilling calm, Dojin stated he had some debt to collect, his eyes beginning to glow with a fiery light as Chilwo met his gaze with a predatory smirk. A tense silence hung between Dojin and Jian. Their gazes locked, a silent challenge passing between them. Jian apologized for the unannounced visit, explaining her uncle had asked her to handle this matter. She mentioned Dojin had sold magic stones at Gazan Stoneman, proposing he sell them to her instead. Dojin simply questioned how much she was offering for them. She confidently declared she would buy everything Mr. Seo Dejun had. A smirk touched Dojin's lips as he remarked on the sizable haul. Juyin countered that an S-class hero's wealth was beyond his imagination. Dojin wasn't against selling, but stated he had a condition, while Kong Chielwo writhed on the floor nearby. He assured her it was nothing major, confident that someone like Hyun Juyin could handle it without a problem. Elsewhere, the sound of a vase shattering echoed loudly. Hong Heju shrieked, incredulous, as she had been told he died in a new rift. Chief Lee looked nervous. He stammered an apology, noting that even the Hero Association had been sure Dojin was dead. Heju raged, demanding how he would fix this mess, before Lee hesitantly mentioned he had something important to report. Lee reported that Kong Chielwo had been struck down by Dojin, which confused Heju, who muttered about that dumbass Chielwo. Her expression shifted as she considered that Seo Dejun might know something incriminating. A nervous gulp escaped her as she processed this unwelcome news. She fretted about her husband or father-in-law hearing, but her greater fear was media exposure crashing stock prices. They had to stop at all costs. Heju frantically ordered Lee to get control of the press, threatening that W Group would pull every ad and to shut the cops up first. Chief Lee calmly informed her they had already silenced the media and the police. Heju let out a sigh of relief, commending Chief Lee for a good job. However, Lee pointed out that this wasn't a real solution, which brought him to his main point. He leaned in and whispered to Heju that Kong Chielwo's cousin was none other than Kong Youngpyo. Heju questioned if it was the same Kong Youngpyo she was thinking of. Chielwo, Lee explained, was infamous even among heroes as complete human trash, often seen carousing. People believed Kong Youngpyo cherished his cousin deeply, as they were often seen dining together in public. But in truth, Chielwo was just the guy doing all of Youngpyo's dirty work. Lee concluded that it seemed Youngpyo was now taking action on his end too. Heju decided they needed to meet him, ordering Lee to schedule a meeting as soon as possible, which Lee acknowledged. She then brought up HCS Capital CEO, Huang Changsip, and his recent betrayal, noting he was now looking after Dojin's family. Her eyes narrowed with cold fury as she vowed Changsip would pay dearly for choosing them over her. She would contact Prosecutor Park immediately. Meanwhile, at the entrance to one of South Korea's 37 active rift zones, a group of heroes, including Juyin, stood ready. 5 of these zones were currently becoming gates, while the rest could only be cleared on scheduled hunts by registered association heroes. An agent verified Hyun Juyin Hero's ID card, wishing her luck on her expedition into the treacherous area. The silhouettes of her party, with Dojin among them, entered the dark, cave-like rift entrance. Dojin observed that there was only one way in, and even with Hyun Juyin present, security was still checking IDs and locking things down tight. Young Inju, an A-rank hero and leader of the Velvet Poppy Guild, sidled up to Juyin, teasing her for being the one who suggested hunting in the rift zone first. Juyin retorted with a touch of exasperation, asking what else she was supposed to do, just sit around twiddling her thumbs? She glanced back at Dojin, who followed them silently into the rift. Dojin, hooded and carrying a bag, was indeed present. He had stated his one condition to Juyin: let him into the rift zone, and he would sell all the magic stones he had to her at full market price, because, as he put it, hunting in the rift paid way better. Juyin privately thought he was completely out of his mind for seriously coming to a deadly rift zone just for that reason. However, she mused that even if it wasn't her uncle's request, she needed hero magic stones anyway, so his peculiar condition didn't really matter to her. As Juyin and Inju walked deeper into the lush, ruin-strewn landscape of the rift, Inju leaned inconspiratorially, asking Juyin to be honest about who that guy really was. Juyin vaguely replied he was just someone she knew. Inju clearly didn't buy that, pressing if he was boyfriend material or what, making Juyin feel as awkward as a penguin trying to explain the offside rule. Juyin insisted it wasn't like that, explaining she just owed him a favor and was bringing him along to pay it back, which surprised Inju, who questioned why an S-rank hero like Hyun-Jian would owe someone a favor. Jian confirmed it was something like that, as Dojin walked steadily beside them. Suddenly, another hero in their party looked up with wide, alarmed eyes. Dojin's own eyes narrowed in sharp focus. The party quickly spread out, instinctively preparing for combat. A massive, grotesque, bird-like monster, a Caucastrian, screeched as it swooped down towards them with terrifying speed. Inju yelled in panic, identifying the fearsome creature as a Caucastrian. Jian immediately barked orders, telling Jinju and Doyen to form a defensive line and for Sungo to cover the creature's legs. Before anyone could fully react, Dojin became a blur of impossible motion. He leaped high into the air, striking the Caucastrian with devastating force before it could reach the party. The entire group, Jian included, stared in utter disbelief at CO Dojin's incredible, explosive speed. Dojin calmly stating, "One down," as the threat was neutralized. The aftermath of Dojin's swift strike on the Caucastrian left a bloody mark in the air. Inju, still reeling, exclaimed that they had been attacked the moment they entered the gate. Just moments before, Dojin had reacted instantly to the lunging monster, even as Jian was still shouting commands to her party. He had moved like a blur, his feet barely touching the ground as he kicked up dirt, intercepting the Caucastrian mid-air. His eyes and hand had pulsed with power as he aimed for the creature's beak, the impact echoing through the rift with a sickening thud. Jian, sword drawn but unused, watched with a flicker of surprise as Dojin stood over the now-fallen Caucastrian. The creature's eye was lifeless. She and Sungo stared, dumbfounded, with Jian muttering if it had truly died in a single hit. Dojin, however, stated, "Not yet," as he stepped forward, bringing his foot down decisively on the monster's head to ensure its demise. The rest of the party, including Inju, could only watch in stunned silence. Inju finally broke the quiet, demanding to know from Jian just who this person was. A bead of sweat trickled down Jian's temple as she wondered if he was simply a very strong individual. Inju, agitated, grabbed Jian, questioning her composure and asking how many heroes could possibly take down a Caucastrian in one blow. Jian, with a slightly forced smile, replied that if it were merely a matter of taking it down, she could have managed it too. But Inju pressed, pointing out that Jian had seen the aerial battle, how the creature couldn't even dodge a direct punch to the face, and all with a single hit. Jian's expression turned serious as she thought about that monstrous bird, her gaze following Dojin, leaving her to ponder his true identity. "Uni," Jian addressed Inju, her tone firm. "I think we need to change the plan." She announced she was heading to the center for a bit, much to the surprise of her team. Meanwhile, Dojin casually carved out the mana stone from the Caucastrian, murmuring an "excuse me," as if he were merely collecting groceries. Holding up the gleaming red stone, he informed Jian he had no intention of sharing with anyone who hadn't contributed to the kill. He then tucked the stone into his bag, adding that he hadn't asked her to share either. Jian observed that his skills seemed out of place here, then inquired if he was considering venturing deeper into the rift. A smirk played on Dojin's lips. "Seems fun," he stated, a clear anticipation in his eyes. She then declared she knew the area well and would lead, advising them to follow closely if they wished to avoid getting lost. Without waiting for a reply, he and Jian dashed off at incredible speed. Dojin briefly noted Jian keeping pace beside him as he moved with brisk, purposeful strides, his movement kicking up a powerful shockwave. Jian thought to herself that if she was considered fast, then this person was pure, unadulterated light. The remaining party members asked Inju if they should follow, but Inju, with a sigh, admitted it was impossible to keep up with that kind of speed. She decided they were just side characters for the day and should wait as they usually did, the group turning their attention back to the fallen Caucastrian. Inju mused that while everyone praised them as A-rank heroes, in front of S-rankers, they were little more than insignificant insects, and that included Jian. And then there was that man, her eyes widening at the thought of Dojin's overwhelming power. Julian pushed herself, dashing forward, her long purple hair streaming behind her as she ran hard. She briefly wondered if she should perhaps slow down a little. Just then, Dojin effortlessly appeared beside her, casually asking if she couldn't go any faster. Julian let out an involuntary yelp of surprise. She couldn't believe it. She was the second fastest person in Korea when it came to sheer speed, yet he was keeping up as if he were out for a Sunday stroll. Had he just been toying with her? Dojin ran slightly ahead, looking back with an air of nonchalance. He remarked that she too was different than he'd expected, running as if she were trying to get away from him. Indignant, Julian retorted, asking who said she was trying to get away, her pride slightly bruised. Dojin feigned a thoughtful expression, while Julian huffed, demanding to know who had done that, clearly implying he had sped up just to tease her. Their run eventually led them to the base of a massive, rocky mountain peak. Julian, slightly out of breath, stopped and asked what was over there. Her eyes, reflecting the towering structure, widened as she pointed there. She then asked if he meant this was where the Rift Zone's boss monster resided. She confirmed she had heard of the Caesarian, a colossal, 20-meter giant resembling a pterosaur, warning that they shouldn't even consider approaching it, as it would take at least 3 S-rank heroes to even stand a chance. Dojin, unfazed, simply asked if this was the creature that possessed the high-quality mana crystal. Julian confirmed it dropped a super high-quality mana crystal, just a step below the absolute highest grade, then exasperatedly asked if he was even listening to her warnings. Ignoring her, Dojin began walking towards the mountain. "Surely, you're not thinking of fighting it, are you?" Julian exclaimed, reminding him she hadn't brought him here for such a reckless endeavor. Dojin continued his advance, and Julian, with a sigh of resignation, followed. "Oh my God, what on earth is he trying to do?" she despaired internally. Suddenly, Dojin called out, "Over there!" and bolted forward once more, Julian struggling to keep up as they sped towards the ominous mountain, leaving dust clouds in their wake, the colossal peak looming ever closer. Julian's eye widened in sheer disbelief. She stood stunned, muttering just what? As the dust settled, the colossal Caesarian lay defeated before her, prompting her to ask what had just happened. Dojin, meanwhile, calmly retrieved his knife from the beast's hide, Julian a distant figure in the background. Julian, still processing, remarked that the Caesarian was supposed to be extremely strong. She recalled the tales of Park Hale, an S-rank hero famed for hunting the Caesarian. Even he, on his first attempt, had gone with 30 A-rank heroes, only for the Caesarian to slaughter them all, leaving Park Hale to barely escape with his life. He had returned, scarred and battered from the encounter. Later, fueled by vengeance, Park Hale had gathered another S-rank hero and 100 A-rank heroes for a retaliatory mission. The A-rank heroes had launched coordinated assaults, their magical attacks swirling around the beast, while Park Hale and his S-rank companion pressed the offensive against the Caesarian's immense form. The entire team had charged forward. Yet, the Caesarian had unleashed a devastating roar and a powerful counterattack, its destructive energy tearing through their ranks. Though they eventually succeeded in hunting the Caesarian, their cheers were a hollow victory, as most of the participating heroes had perished in the brutal fight. The Thunder Life Guild, which Park Hale managed, hadn't recovered its strength for 3 long years after that Pyrrhic victory, Julian remembered as Dojin efficiently carved into the fallen monster. Julian, watching him, felt a spark of irritation, reminding him that he knew she hadn't contributed anything to this kill. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she would never have believed it. That infamous Caesarian. This man had taken it down with a single decisive blow. Dojin then pulled out a massive, pulsating red mana crystal. He examined the crystal for a moment, silent. He then turned to Julian, stating he no longer needed her guidance. From this point forward, he would move alone, he declared, preparing to leave as Julian watched. She quickly asked if he wasn't going to take any of the Caesarian's byproducts, like its valuable feathers or claws, besides the mana stone. Dojin paused in his stride. They weren't profitable, he replied with a slight, dismissive smile. Jian gave him an unimpressed look, thinking he was either incredibly wealthy or just didn't care about money like a normal person. He elaborated that it was better to focus on getting mana stones from other monsters during this time. She could take the byproducts, considering them her guidance fee. Jian looked towards the Caesarian's remains, a flicker of desire in her eyes as she thought, I need it. Just then, the rest of Jian's party arrived, taking in the scene of Dojin, Jian, and the felled beast. Dojin nonchalantly dropped a heavy bag at their feet. The party members stared at the bulging bag, their expressions a mixture of shock and awe. One of them whispered to another, recounting how this man had borrowed that giant bag and returned with it completely filled with mana stones, questioning if they could even believe such a thing. Another hero quickly calculated that at this rate, their entire guild would need at least 20 hours of continuous hunting to match this quantity, and judging by the quality, it would likely take around 3 whole days of dedicated hunting. Jian, observing this, found herself wondering again, what on earth is his true identity? She thought that even ignoring the incredible speed and the sheer volume of his haul. Inju, her eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying realization, thought that if Jian was right, he had defeated the Caesarian single-handedly, without any special moves or even a protective suit. That feat alone would make him the strongest hero in Korea, perhaps even the strongest hero in the entire world. Inju concluded, a shiver running down her spine. She looked on nervously as Dojin calmly walked back towards them, carrying yet another heavy bag. He dropped the second bag with a thud. Wow, I finally brought all of them over, Dojin remarked, almost to himself. He added that even if they brought this much back today, no one would believe them. They'd just be called crazy. One of the party members quickly interjected, asking them to keep this quiet, as no one would believe such a crazy story anyway, to which another chuckled in agreement. Jian began to walk away. The party members watched as Dojin and Jian conversed quietly nearby. One hero nudged another, whispering that those two were totally flirting, and perhaps they should have noticed when Jian brought such a strange man along. The other agreed, adding that the man must at least have a handsome face to be worthy of Jian, and that they suited each other, looking like a beautiful couple. Inju, however, cut in sharply, hold on. It's not right to call that flirting. She explained that the man treated Jian with extreme rudeness, and it had never crossed her mind that anyone would dare treat Jian in such a manner. Just then, Dojin handed one of the heavy bags to Jian. He then turned and walked away, leaving the stunned party members with the remaining bags of loot. One of them asked, bewildered, if that guy had just left without even saying goodbye, to which Inju numbly confirmed he had. The hero then pointed to the bags, asking if he had left all of them behind. Inju explained that when she had mentioned he'd become famous for defeating Caesarian, he had simply stated he hated the spotlight and asked her to take care of everything, her eyes widening as the implication of his words sunk in. What kind of man is this? The hero asked, completely baffled. Jian remained silent, lost in thought, a faint blush coloring her cheeks as she echoed the sentiment internally. What kind of man is this? The city sprawled below, a modern marvel of towering buildings, among which stood the prominent BHY Sports Hall. Inside, the rhythmic thud of fists against a punching bag echoed. Park Hale, his eyes glowing with intense focus, unleashed a flurry of powerful blows, each punch landing with concussive force. His gaze was sharp, filled with raw determination. This was Park Hale, an S-rank hero affiliated with the Korean Hero Association and leader of the Sweet Life Guild, currently in a state of intense training. A sharply dressed, smarmy man approached Hale, urging him to calm down, guild leader. He continued with fawning praise, saying how the more Hale endured such hardship, the greater his reputation became. Hale affirmed that with such training, he could deliver a decisive blow to those who underestimated him, his subordinate agreeing that every ounce of power built would become explosive force. Hale's expression was grimly set, tears of exertion in his eyes as his subordinate assured him that when the time came, everyone would bow before him. The subordinate added with a sly look, besides, who knows Caesarian's strategy better than you? guild leader. He then offered Hale a drink, mentioning that one day Hale would be known as the hero who defeated Caesarion with the fewest people, even suggesting every hero guild would grant him exclusive rights to Caesarion hunts. Hale took the offered bottle, taking a long drink while his subordinate held out a towel, declaring that no one knew that better than him. A trophy and a framed photo of Hale's guild in their prime were displayed nearby, but a caption noted that compared to 3 years ago, the guild's influence had significantly dwindled. Despite this, Hale boasted with a confident smirk that he was still the only one capable of defeating that flying monster. Wasn't that so? His subordinate readily agreed, asking who else but the guild leader could accomplish such a feat. Their laughter, mostly the subordinates, echoed outside the BHY sports hall. Elsewhere, Kong Youngpyo reviewed a report containing a picture of Co Dojin. He looked up from the papers, asking his assistant if this was Co Dojin, the S-rank hero from the BU Guild, also the nephew of the W Group's S-rank hero, Kong Chulwo. His assistant confirmed, adding that a few months prior, Chulwo had tried to trap and kill Dojin in a gate. The assistant further clarified that Dojin had not only survived, but had also awakened, prompting Youngpyo to instruct him to continue. The client, the assistant revealed, was Hong Hee-ju, the executive director of T Group, and also the second daughter of W Group. They said Co Dojin was an illegitimate child of T Group, brought into the family at 7, but expelled 6 years ago when Hong Hee-ju gave birth to her own son. Youngpyo let out a chilling laugh, remarking that even blood ties meant nothing in the world of the rich, apparently. He then inquired how much money Chulwo had received for the hit. The sum, the assistant stated, was 3 billion won, causing Youngpyo to scoff if that was all. He then asked about the rumors of Chulwo suffering a permanent disability. The assistant confirmed he'd heard Chulwo was beaten violently, his body covered in scars, his eyes gouged, barely surviving. Youngpyo, a golf club now in hand, commented on such mercilessness as he casually sank a golf ball. If it were him, he mused with a lick of his lips, he would have torn Chulwo limb from limb and crushed his head. At the scene of the incident, there were rumors that Jian had helped Co Dojin. Youngpyo stated his golf club tapping the ball, which then missed the hole. He turned angrily to his assistant, demanding to know what Jian was doing helping that man and what her relationship with him was. The assistant claimed ignorance, but noted that thanks to Jian's testimony to the police, the case had ended quietly. Youngpyo grabbed his assistant, furiously demanding he find out what was going on between them, suspecting a deal. The terrified assistant stammered that he would find out, sir. Youngpyo's face was a mask of cold fury. He gripped his golf club tightly, then with a guttural yell, smashed it against the floor, the head snapping off. He declared that soon, Hong Hee-ju's men will be searching for Dojin, and they would see him do what Chulwo couldn't. He then turned, a chillingly calm expression on his face, stating, "All right, don't mind." A predatory grin spread across his features as he thought about the very rich lady who would have plenty of money. Under the light of a full moon, Dojin's new house stood peacefully. He walked along the quiet street towards it, reflecting that, as expected, hunting in rifts was far more efficient than hunting through gates. He briefly wondered if this meant he would have to rely on Jian's assistance to enter rift zones from now on. He recalled Jian telling him that if he sold the Caesarion magic stones, people would find out he killed it and would question his skills, but that she would handle the media for the time being. She had asked what he would do if he was aiming for fame, as she wouldn't stop him. He had simply handed her the bag of stones, stating he needed to find another way to enter the rift zone. For now, he planned to rest at the new home Huang Changxi had prepared. The sound of a door creaking open reached him, and his eyes widened in surprise. Several pairs of unfamiliar men's shoes were neatly lined up inside. He pushed the door open further, calling out for his brother, Yunijing. Inside, Yunijing and his grandmother were sitting, looking scared, surrounded by Huang Changxi and several of his thuggish subordinates. Huang Changxi, or rather, the man Prosecutor Park, looked up. Yunijing rushed to Dojin, crying his name, as Dojin coldly asked who these uninvited guests were. The imposter, Huang Changxi, introduced himself as Prosecutor Park from the Seoul District Prosecutor's Office, noting that Dojin knew Huang Chang-seep, didn't he? Dojin remained silent. The fake prosecutor then declared Dojin was under arrest for participation in illegal high-interest lending activities orchestrated by HCS Capital CEO Huang Chang-seep.